What is going on, everyone, and welcome to a special video. So what we're going to be talking about today is gear progression from seasons. Now, I thought this was a very good time to be talking about this. Ever since the Abyss 1 Magnus thingy came out, as you guys can see, there's a lot of pen boss gears just sitting on the market, and I figured now would be a good time to talk about like how you guys should progress from season, also because season is still going on right now. And I think it's about, it's been about like 2 weeks since the season started for this one. And I figured at this point, there's a lot of people at full pen to Vala gear, and you're probably wondering, okay, so where do I go from here? Now, with the Abyss 1 Magnus thingy, there's a reward that gives you a free pen armor box, which is this thing. And you get to pick whichever one you want. So that'll be factored into how I choose what you should do. So, first of all, if you are playing a seasoned character, I assume your gear looks somewhat similar to this. Basically, full pen, everything. Just ignore that earring, by the way. But yeah, assuming you are full pen to Vala, it should look like that. And where do you go from here? So, first of all, after you finish seasons, and even just new players, I would say start going through the Jetina's quest line, or not really quest line, but it's like how to get a guaranteed pen and armor. So from experience and just like general tips I can give you is, so when you're making Jetina's weapons and armors, they have two different costs. So as you know, they get more expensive as it goes on. So like if you make one of them, your first pen is cheaper than your second one, because it requires more materials to craft. So, as always with weapons, I would say go with your one that you're playing first. So, for example, if you're playing Succession, obviously you go for your main hand. If you're going Awakening, then you could always have the choice of the Awakening one second. But I would always start with the Awakening one, or not Awaken main hand first, because this gives you a lot of accuracy. And it's not going to be Black Star, so just let's look at a thing you're actually going to get. So Zarka. People have always asked me, is it better to go for Zarka or Often? And generally the answer is Zarka all the way through, because accuracy is a big factor. I know people like to see big number, big AP, more damage, but that only works at a certain bracket of gear. And Zarka will generally be an overall better until you can upgrade to Black Star, which is the end game goal. So when you're doing Jetina's stuff, you're basically going for a pen Zarka. And overall, I would say you should go for this one first, because it gives a lot of accuracy that the Awakening weapon doesn't go through first. So yeah, accuracy is important, especially if you want a PvP, and just in general, if you plan on grinding higher end spots, accuracy does become important later on. So even as a stat stick, if you're playing Awakening, the 200 accuracy is very solid. And then after that, you would always go for, I'm just doing the DK ones just because I know what I'm looking for. Then after that, you should go for the weapon after. And the reason why, no matter what, I would always go Awaken second is because it has a weird stat balance, because at pen you get a little bit more AP, but you're trading off like 180 accuracy, and that's huge actually. So that's one thing I wish that BDO would change in general, is they should move that 200 accuracy from your main hand weapon and like split it to like 100 something, and give another 100 to your Awakening. That way people can't just hard focus one of them, and they would have to like actually make a decision. So that's just my thing. Are they going to change it? Probably not, but the way it is now, main hand first, Awakening second, and then sub weapon third. But you can get away with a lot of different sub weapons, especially for different things. So then when you go to armors, it's a little bit more clear nowadays what priority order you should go for. because a lot of them you get for free or cheap nowadays. So let's say you're doing the Jetina one, and there's generally a rule of when you get your first two, like your first two pens, it'll be cheaper to do the Jetina quest and instead of buying it off the market, because the material cost will be a lot more. But with costs of things now during the Magnus thing, where people are just like hard min listing theirs because they got the free box, it's a little bit like even, more or less. But in general, if you're just using it to progress for yourself, what I would go for first is the armor piece, and we'll just look at it on the market because this one is more like realistic. So you're gonna have the choice of a red nose and dim tree armor. I would go to red nose because your ultimate endgame goal would be to pick up the fallen god armor afterwards. And the reason why we're doing red nose instead of dim tree is because you require less capris. I think about like 1,200 less. So literally just saving 3 billion silver or more. And that's why you would want to go for the pen red nose, because ultimately you make the fallen god the same way with red nose and dim tree. You just save a few billion more for that. So yeah, your first Jetina's armor or pen should be the armor, and then your second one should be the helmet, which you have an option for Gaiath and Griffin. Now, during the process, I do think that the Griffin helmet is worth a lot more than Gaiath. Now, the reason why is, one, Gaiath came out a long time ago before the Griffin helmet even existed, because this is here when the game more or less came out the first few years. And then once Kama Sylvia came out, that's when the Griffin one became more popular. So ultimately, I think the Griffin's helmet is the way to go while you're progressing into the Libresca helmet, which is the end game, which is the equivalent of a fallen god. But yeah, so when you have the option of Gaiath and Griffin, just choose the Griffin. They both cost the same in terms of Capris. Once you get it to Capris 10, you can farm for the flame thingy at Jade's Starlight Forest, I believe. And yeah, so your ultimate goal is to get the Griffin, then you'll farm for the flame, and then you turn it into Libresca. But the reason why is because resistances is worth a little bit more than the small health pool you get. So at late game, 100 HP sounds nice, but when you're fighting people with like 269 AP or higher, that 100 HP isn't helping you. You'd rather have the 5% resistances to potentially not get grabbed and CC'd, so that will save you far more than that 100 extra health will. But realistically, is there difference? It's very minimal, but just that 5% might save you 1 in X amount of times. So that's why I would go for that second, because the Libresca actually exists right now. And in the future, we're gonna get a, like, whatever Fallen God Libresca equivalent to the gloves. And I would say if you're doing the Magnus one, you should get the Magnus free pen from the box and use the Jetina one to make the other two first, because once you get to the third one, it starts getting a little bit more expensive, to the point where it's probably better to buy it off the market. So as I mentioned, with the whole box of the free pen, you can get your third piece now, right? And I would use it on the gloves, because that is going to be next for the like red tier item, and that is already confirmed. So yeah, so 1, 2, 3, and then shoes will be last. Now, people have always been asking whether you should go evasion versus the DR route. Now, I could go on a huge rant and just make a long video on what the difference is, but realistically, I would just go to DR route up until you have enough gear, which is very late game, and then you swap to evasion. But by the time you are considering swapping to evasion, you probably already have like over 680 to 700 gear score, so you probably know what you're doing at that point. So it's actually pretty clear nowadays what like priority orders to go for. So chest, helmet, gloves, shoes, in that order, just because like your upgrade potential is already there and this one is coming out next. So after that, you're probably wondering, what do I do for accessories? So as you guys are playing through seasons, you guys know there's a season reward tab, right? So with that, you always want to go for the Pen Kaposha necklace first. It gives the most stats for the free one. And then it's going to take you multiple seasons. So like you get one reward per season. And then I'm just telling you the priority of what you should get. So necklace first. Where is it? The belt second. And then the ring third. And earring fourth. I'm going in stat priority order. So you'll get the most gains by picking that. And you guys may be wondering, why should I pick the belt versus the Kaposha ring? And that part itself is less relevant. Like, they're both the same stats. You can choose ring if you want it, but in terms of like actual priority order, necklace first and earring last. So there is another Jetina quest that I have done already that allows you to pick between one of 3 pen accessories, and it's not particularly free, it's just guaranteed is what we should call it. And so you get to choose a Narc earring, a Crescent ring, or a Tungrat earring. Now, I personally think that for most people, the Crescent ring is probably the best choice. I personally chose the Narc earring because at my stage in the game, I think I find it more valuable than someone who needs it. And my next goals are to actually upgrade to Tungrats anyway, so it would be a swap anyway. So, yeah. What order should you go for accessories? Now, the answer to that is a little bit tricky because accessories are not so clear-cut compared to like armors and stuff. Because at endgame, there are different builds. Like if you want to play a more defensive build, do you want to go glass cannon? Do you want to have a hybrid? Personally, I would say hybrids are not really the best choice in this game unless you have a lot of gear where it could make sense to do it. But in general, the rule is just go AP because it'll help you grind faster. It'll help you PvP. Well, like your PvP performance becomes a lot easier. And generally, the rule for PvE is just don't get hit, learn to grind better. So it'll allow you to help, like, clear speed is faster. So just more AP in general is a lot better than hybrid builds. So if you see people with like stacked out evasion DP, it's because they know what they're doing and they have a lot of gear already. So if you're actually just progressing, AP is the way to go. And the way I go about any gear progression is on your server, because this is definitely going to be different from NA, EU, C server, Korea, whatever. You look at the market price and you find out what will give you the most stats for the least amount of money. And generally, that order goes in from your necklace slot, and then potentially your belt, and then your rings, and then your earrings. So with that said, it's obviously very different, and there's no right or wrong order. I'm just going by most stats for the least amount of money. So pick what you think might be good. There's a lot of options. If you have any like difficulty picking or you just need advice, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer it. Just leave it in the comments and I'll read it. So yeah, after accessories, assuming you have full like whatever pen stuff from the season ones, that's when you start upgrading into like whatever's better. And generally that rule would be, so the Kaposha is basically a Tet Ogre, and then that one's a very strong one that you can just hold on until you get a pen one. After that, when you get a belt, the belt is a very good one up until late game, until you think of something you want to do for pen. And then earrings and rings are where things get a little bit tricky because you have a lot of options. So let's look at the accessories right now. So for rings, we have Crescent rings, which is your cheapest option. And it's pretty good stats for the price value. However, these are kind of, I wouldn't say dead end upgrades. It's just like the least stats out of all the other choices, but it is a good budget alternative. So Eye of the Ruins are the exact same stats as Crescent Rings. The difference is it gives you the extra 100 to 130 health on the side of it. So in terms of AP and accuracy, same thing. You just get some health on the side, which I think is pretty valuable at very late game, but just not early on. And then Tungrads are the AP option. It's also the most expensive option, and you just get that one extra AP, but you're paying like 50 billion extra. Is it really worth it? Not really, but if you're trying to stack the AP and push yourself up into a higher bracket, then I think it's worth it. And then as for like DP and like everything else, accuracy, that comes in a little bit later, and you wouldn't worry about it until you already know what you're doing and how you want to build your character. So by that point, you don't need my advice and help. You have figured that out yourself. So now is where we're getting into the last slot of earrings. So by default, we're going to take a look at the Tungrads, because these are the equivalent of like something you would get from, I don't know, everything else. So these are the default. These are the oldest accessories or earrings in the game that like were relevant back in the day. And so we're going to compare everything from here on up. So if you're going for Tet, that's 15 to 17 AP. Where do you go from there? You have the option to have the more or less hybrid AP and DP, and you really only get Narc earrings if you want to grind places in Kama Sylvia, which does help. But it is a cheaper option to get a little bit tankier. And if you want to go like the more AP route, you would go Distos. Baja's Dawns and Distortion earrings are basically the same thing, just two different items that you get from two different places. Stats are exactly the same though. So with that said, Distortion earrings are probably the best like AP value. It is kind of expensive, but it does give you the most AP. But at the same time, I think it's hard to recommend Distortion earrings to people who are like lower geared, because this one, as you guys know, it gives you a lot of AP, but your trade-off is DP. So for example, for me, I'm running two of them, so my DP is down by 8, and obviously DP is valuable in a way, but yeah. So I think after a certain bracket or like certain point, then you start converting, but it's very hard to say. And for earrings, like what else do? We have accuracy options, which is the same thing as when we talked about earring or rings. By the point of you swapping to accuracy, you're probably already geared, and you don't need my help at that point. But yeah, the two like big options these days are Tungrads, Distortions, and Narcs. So whatever you think you need. This has a little bit less AP, but more not accuracy, DP, which will help you survive a little bit better. Tungrads are the general baselines, the budget options for now, and Distortions is the glass cannon option. So now that we talked about how to go about progressing your accessories and your armor, where do you go from here? So I would work on artifacts. Now, there's no right or wrong answer for artifacts. It's really personal preference. But as a general guideline, if you are PvPing a lot, you would want to go for the accuracy ones. And how do you know if you're magic or melee? Well, you should probably know that by the class you're playing already. But just in case you don't, hit your information button, and then the combat type will be right here. And it'll tell you, are you magic? Are you melee? Ranged? It's kind of self-explanatory for the most part. But some of them are a little tricky. Like at one point, you're like, Draconia, is that magic or melee? But anyway, just look at your combat type over here. It's really straightforward information. But in terms of artifacts, AP, just more damage. Accuracy is more for the PvP side. A lot of these are also experimental, a lot of life skill ones. I personally have this one on as a test, and it's experiment, so don't really copy me, just straight DR. And I find it helpful at places like Ash Forest, but it's more for a PvE thing. I don't use it for PvP. And then if you're grinding, straight XP is always nice. So very personal preference, and the best place to get artifacts in general is go to your monster zone info and just like look through all of these to find which one you need. But the general guideline for me and what I would recommend is going to Kratuga, because it basically drops all of them. And while it may be a larger pool of artifacts, you get more of them per hour grinding. So like in general, from my experience, you'll have a higher chance of getting the one you want by grinding Kratuga, because they drop more often than if you were single-handedly trying to focus down one at a specific spot. So for example, I grinded Renaros when I was going for the infinite potion piece, right? Like all the potion pieces, I got maybe like 1 or 2 artifacts every like few hours, which is kind of awful. But at Kratuga, while there is a larger pool, I got maybe like 4 to 6 of random ones an hour. So I think the chances of you getting the one you want is probably higher at Kratuga, even if there's a larger pool. So yeah, with that said, in terms of Lightstones, where do you go? Just Google like a Lightstone combo and then you'll figure it out. But in terms of just buying what you want, there's a Lightstone tab on the central market. Just figure it out, and then you can straight up just buy it most of the time. So finally, where do you go from here? I guess when we were talking about weapons, there's a Kudum versus Nuva. The answer really is Kudum if you're PvPing, Nuva if you're PvPing. Accuracy is more for PvP if you think you need it, but I very rarely think I need like accuracy offhands, but I have one just in case. So generally, as a guideline, Blackstar or Kudum, PvP, Nuva, PvP, PvE, PvP. Got it. So after that, what do? You're gonna want to start going for your Garmoth's Heart, which is this item. It's very hard to get on NA, and I'm not sure about other servers, but at least on NA, it's very hard to get. So you would probably want to put an order on. Dude, Jesus, there's so many. They really need to start upping the drop rate of Garmoth's Hearts, because you get like 1 every 2 days. And by 1, I mean 1 drops in a boss event of thousands of people, maybe 2. And that's how many I see listed daily. So there is a quest line to do it, but it's so tedious to do, and it's probably you have a higher chance of just putting an order on and getting it, which is not even high itself. I got very lucky, and I've been playing this game for a long time, to the point where I've gotten all my Garmoth's Hearts and stuff already done. But for everyone else, it is a good upgrade. Is it high priority? No. It's one of those like end game, you're polishing up your gear, getting everything else done, and it's extra, but it's nice to have. And then lastly, you're gonna want to work on your Alchemy Stone, and it is expensive. A lot of the stuff I am telling you is with current prices. If you were to have asked me about Alchemy Stones years ago, I personally, when I first started, I don't think that Spirit Stones are bad. I think if you are new, feel free to use it. I mean, they're disposable, they're very cheap, and the stats are better than not having it. So when you plan on upgrading to actual repairables, what I did back in the day is I went for a sharp Alchemy Stone, so this one, and then I went straight to a Vel. With that said, as you guys saw in the message, Vel is spawning in 30 minutes, and I'm gonna do that. But anyway, so if you are new in like budget, you're thinking about getting your first Alchemy Stone, I would try to get a sharp one, because the stats are not bad, and then start working your way up into a Vel's Heart, and then get the upgrade for that Vel's Heart later. If you're planning on going the DP route, personally, I would use the Perilla's Star later on. You get this from the season reward, which I know we talked about gear. It's going to take you like 5 seasons to get it. but the Perilla's Star is the one from the Autumn one. Basically, it's your DP stone, and it gives you 1 sheet DP, which is pretty nice. So I would use that one. I personally have a Resplendent stone that I got years ago. Honestly, I don't really use it that much. I just kind of have it just to have it. And yeah, so for your general person, I think that the Perilla's Star will do just fine. And as for, where is it? So we talked about destruction and protection. If you're a life skiller, where do you go from here? I personally went the sharp route. Well, actually, honestly, I used the life spirit stone for a long time because I was like, okay, so this is the reason why you're using it. You're getting it for the gathering 10%. Everything else is fixable with like food buffs. So the reason why you're using a life stone is probably for the gathering 10%, right? And so when I did it back in the day, I was like, okay, so my friends are always telling me, friends and guildies, like, you should get the sharp one. This was before Khan's Heart even existed, and even then, the Resplendent and Splendids were basically unavailable, and they still are unavailable. So you would go to sharp route, and I've always questioned, is 13% really worth the 1 bill upgrade? The answer is technically yes, but will you notice a difference in your hourly life skill grind? Probably not. So it does pay off eventually, but will you notice it immediately? Probably not. So after that, I guess like the general guideline, because these are more available than everything else, is the Khan's Heart. And you could get that by bartering with sea coins or just putting up an order. I don't think it's that hard to get a Khan's Heart these days. If you just put an order, you'll get it within like a week. So yeah, that's been pretty much gear progression. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will help you. Just leave it in the comments, join the Discord and all that stuff. So I'm happy to help new players. But yeah, just let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you guys later. Oh yeah, before we go, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. I will appreciate it, and let's help the channel grow. You guys are awesome, and I try to post videos pretty regularly. So yeah, with that said, I'll see you guys later, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.